thank you for joining me, basically. I think given that what we were talking about earlier this week, and I think given my history and the evolution of Experts for Expats from like offering free consultations as the primary service that we do to introductions with free consultations to now we're doing discovery calls. I'm kind of fascinated by some of the experiences and the changes over the years about how that's happened. And obviously, this past week, you've had a few inquiries where the discovery call hasn't quite met expectations or hasn't quite resonated. And I think I just wanted to kind of, because so many people, so many services, so many businesses out there use an initial call just to set the scene. And I think I want to have this conversation now to just kind of explain and set expectations about what it is that can be expected on these calls, what you as a partner of Experts for Expats believes that is within limitations, what's legally possible, and ultimately what the role of AI, like the increasing role of generative AI that we're all seeing starting to play a part in how these discovery calls are kind of evolving. And obviously it's a changing world. So from your perspective, what's the difference between discovery call and a consultation?
So, I mean, I suppose when you're saying discovery call and consultation, you mean like advisory work and kind of discovery call, initial consultation?
I mean, ultimately, just the two terminologies. So when you're talking to a client and you say, well, actually, let's have a consultation about this versus let's have a discovery call, how in your mind do you see those expectations being, or the expectations of what you're going to offer and the conversations being different, and what limitations do you put onto both?
No worries. So I suppose personally, for me, an initial I mean, we call them initial consultations in our firm, but initial consultation discovery calls, that is generally, from my perspective, trying to get an understanding of somebody's situation, and trying to understand what sort of work might be required. It might be within I say that because we offer 15-minute initial consultations. I'm going to be honest, I always allow myself a 5-minute wiggle room because I talk a lot. But so they usually are 20-minute initial consultations, but it could possibly be that it's really clear, because you do occasionally get people who are like, I just want to make sure I'm doing the right things and jumping through the hoops, and it might be really clear that actually they are worrying about nothing. And in those sorts of instances, I would generally try and put their mind at rest, and and not have to charge if we don't have to charge. But the initial consultation process is designed to maybe broad brush outline what somebody's situation might be, get an understanding of what work might be required, and be able to hopefully provide some sort of fee quote, or advise the potential client what additional information might be required to be able to provide a fee quote for getting started with some work. At that stage, because it's not charged for, there's no letter of engagement in place, we shouldn't really be giving out any sort of formal advice at that stage. Whereas in an advisory call setting, personally, we tend to have longer. We do either 30-minute or 60-minute advisory calls. We will have a letter of engagement in place. We'll have undertaken our necessary due diligence before the call. We'll generally have obtained some information in advance of the call as well, so we're able to prepare and make sure that people aren't necessarily catching us on the hoof. And personally, I try and provide as much information as I can. I actually try and provide as much information as I can in both calls. But I would say in the initial consult process, I don't tend not to try and tie myself down to providing formal advice.
Yeah, and ultimately that's essential, right? I mean, you've talked about doing the due diligence side of things. Now, this is professional services. We work with financial advisors, we work with mortgage advisors, we work with legal people, so many different types of people, but they're all professional services. These are all people who have years of experience, who've gone through qualifications, who have regulations to adhere to. Whatever service you're providing, there has to be regulations in place, but also insurances, right? So to be able to do, like, one of the things that I kind of pride Experts for Expats on is kind of like, we obviously have a website with information on it, and we don't call, we might label it advice, but it's not advice. We make it very clear that it's not advice. Ultimately, what people search for is advice, and it's that kind of grey area. but it absolutely definitely is not advice.
Yeah.
And it's that distinction and understanding of, well, what can actually be done for free, because the due diligence, and please feel free to correct me, the due diligence that you need to do on any client is to protect the client as well as
Yeah.
yourselves, right? It's
Yes.
your insurance requires you to do it to make sure that there's no money laundering in place, that that you have all the information available, that if like in 15 minutes you've only got so much. So occasionally we'll get
Yeah.
someone who says, and we had one a couple of days ago, an inquiry a couple of days ago, where someone just said, well, if I send this through this big long document,
Yeah.
can you read it in advance for us, and
Yeah.
then could you tell me about it? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
no. To me, it's sorry, no. If you want us to read this, we can read it, but that's essentially the discovery call. You would then have to
Yeah.
trust us in terms of the relation. So I see the reason why we call it a discovery call is because it's a two-way discovery,
Yeah.
and it kind of takes out that advisory element. It takes out any kind of forethought that it's like you're not going to discover the answers here. You're just going to
Yeah.
discover something, and that discovery might be, as you say, it's well, if there's nothing to do, then it's going to be really clear. But
Yes.
if there's something to do, it's, well, we've discovered this about you and we need to do more investigation. Hopefully you've discovered something about us and you think that, yes, I am a trustworthy person. And that's where, for me, it's about connection. It's about understanding the role of each person, understanding where that limitation is and what is therefore feasible in this 15-minute chat. It's about discovery.
Yeah. Most definitely. And you're saying about kind of getting to know people, and in terms of what we kind of say, what we do, and what we find. So the majority of our clients and potential clients, I sometimes feel like we get treated slightly differently to maybe regular accountants. I've worked, my family firm's a high street accountant, and I've worked there, and people quite often who use high street accountants, because that's the general area that they
Yeah.
would use high street accountants for, um, don't necessarily value the advisory side. They almost expect that advisory side should be provided for free. What they're paying for is the compliance, but they don't value the compliance. So what they want is the advisory side, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it. Now, in the vast majority of instances, the people who tend to approach us do actually come to us and acknowledge that um, there is a requirement, and it is that in-depth knowledge that they're after from us. And in the few instances where realistically, 10 minutes and I've managed to say, you don't actually need to worry about this. In general, actually, the client will tend to
Yeah.
get in touch and go, actually, can I pay you for this? And I'm like, well,
Mhm.
no, because it's free. It's a free call, and it is what it is. But so we are quite fortunate, because the vast majority of people that get in touch with us do tend to come to us with a view to, we need advice, we need that support, and we are willing to pay for that advice because we appreciate it's a tricky area, it's value add. But occasionally you do get people who are like, well, almost like, I would like the advice for free, and it's the compliance side I want to pay for. And I think those are the ones that maybe sometimes we might, as a firm, struggle with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's a demarcation as well there. You mentioned high street firms and like accounting practices and things like that. And obviously doing a tax return in the UK, if you are pretty normal, pretty average, decent salary, self-employed, or have some property or whatever, it's pretty straightforward. You don't have international boundaries, tax duties to
Yeah.
take into consideration, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, doing a tax return, crack on. You can almost do it. Well, you
Yeah.
can do it yourself, right? If you really want to do a self-assessment tax return, you can do it yourself. The moment that you have an international element to it, suddenly there's different forms, there's analyzing
Oh yeah.
resident status, how's HMRC going to view this?
Yeah.
What about what's happening locally for you if you live abroad versus what happens locally for any assets that you have internationally? And I mean, I should be, not so much I should be talking to you about this. I meant to be listening, obviously. But because I'm so close to the inquiries that come in, and we it's a personal thing for me. It's all about interacting with people and introducing people to specialists who are
Yeah.
also people. And it's that demarcation and it's that division of what is expected locally, what you're used to locally versus the moment that you make things more complex, you increase the
Yeah.
stress, which actually increases the potential cost. It's not about that, but this is why the discovery call is so important, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. And I think as well, it's getting that understanding up front about the likely fee scope. I mean, we're not excessive. We're not up, like, kind of in terms of fee wise, we're not alongside the big four kind of fee ranges, but equally we are more expensive than a high street firm because it is a niche and there's not that many people that can I say that can understand, but like that are
I know what you mean.
comfortable with global mobility and expatriate tax and so, I mean, as a result, we are very fortunate. We are very busy at the moment, and we are getting busier and busier. So we have to think. I mean, again, both Simon and I are sometimes we'll kind of go with our hearts and be like, oh, well, they're really nice, and we want to be able to help them. But equally, we are a business, and we have to be able to put roofs over both ours and our employees' heads as well. So um, we and again, if my former business coach always used to say, like, Laura, if nobody's saying no to your work, you need to up your fees, um, because that means you're not charging enough. But again, that discovery is really a good starting point from not only our perspective, but from a potential client's perspective, in terms of um, getting an understanding of what the fee ranges are likely to be, and whether again, I think personality wise as well, it's getting an understanding as to whether that's a good fit for you, because fundamentally we are all humans and not everybody gets on with everybody else.
Yeah, and that actually kind of nice little segue of the other side to this, which is people coming to us with a pre-researched view
Yeah,
on their situation, which may have come about through internet searches, or these days ChatGPT has said, "Hey, this is the way to go. This is the answer," and it's pretty bloody confident about it. Um,
yeah,
but before I kind of get there, like the, there is this kind of expectation that okay, you can just do a tax return, or you can just do. And I think that the thing that I find is often escaped, or maybe skipped, is the years of experience that you have and the years of
yeah,
experience that I have. So when I get an inquiry, I've been doing this for 12 years, 13 years now,
yeah,
and it's that I can spot the personality. Like you can see trends, you can see traits, you can spot the
yeah,
personality, you can see um, what kind of person it is based on what they say, and that allows me as a human being
yeah,
to say, well, actually, this is going to suit this partner better,
yeah,
and it's not necessarily about their wealth, it's not about their interests, it's about, well, my partners generally know what they're doing. In fact,
yeah,
always know what they're doing. They are very experienced, and we trust them. Like when we place that introduction, we trust that they can help, but we also trust that they would say, actually, this isn't for us if they can't.
yeah.
Um, but it's that personal bit. It's the, well, we're matching people to people at the end of the day, and
Yeah,
making sure that actually they're more likely to get the kind of interaction that they're expecting. And that again is back to the discovery call. It's also about, is that personality match a good match? Um,
yeah,
so yeah, but
yes,
then you have the people who've done the research. Done
yeah,
the research. So famous, such a famous saying. Earlier today, I was talking about when the dream becomes a reality, or when the dream becomes
yeah,
a nightmare. Well, now it's, well, when we do our own research, and of course, the
yeah,
internet is full of information, and some of it is correct, some of it's inaccurate. You've
yeah,
got the statute resonance test, which is essentially a flowchart.
yeah,
You've got
yeah,
how to fill in forms. You've got, this is how you do a tax return. But at the end of the day, if someone is wanting to do it themselves and avoid the costs of an expert, is that a feasible approach to take when you've got an international complex tax
So,
matter?
so that is a very, very good question. I have been known in like previously, even like this most recent tax year, um, I do have the occasional client that will get in touch because they want to do it themselves. They want to feel like they're doing it themselves. They want to learn. And again, really fortunate we have a lot of clients who are very inquisitive, very smart, and want to do it, just want to understand it really. So they like to do it themselves, but then equally they like to just get an understanding that they are doing it right, and some feedback on that. So 9 times out of 10 in instances like that, it's a non-resident landlord um, who whose situation is going to be the same year in, year out. And really the first year it's they're trying to get an understanding of their residence pages, how they should be filled out. Because, for example, if you're a UK tax non-resident, you don't automatically get a personal allowance. You have to physically say apply for a personal allowance, but you have to tick some boxes, otherwise you don't get a personal allowance. The minute you have anybody who's looking at maybe needing to make a treaty relief claim form, I'll be saying no. No, you want to get somebody to be supporting you with that. Similarly with split year treatment, really isn't great to be doing on your own. Obviously the non-dom rules have just changed, but if you've got somebody who's a non-dom with maybe some sort of remittances, as soon as you start looking at like mixed fund accounts, etc., pass it over. Let the professionals have a look at it at this stage. As soon as you get in the international aspect involved as well, that's the point at which you can't file a return through a government gateway account, which adds another layer of complexity. So on the face of it, you've got 3 ways to file. You can do a paper return, which you then have till the 31st of October. You can download HMRC approved software, or you can engage a professional to do it. And personally, I would not touch paper return as like any time, because if you do a paper return, you post it to HMRC, but it's the obligation falls on you to make sure that HMRC have actually received it. And HMRC are fairly well known for losing post. Um, back in the day when you used to hand over your tax returns at the tax office, my dad used to go and actually, he'd hand them over on like the 31st of January, and they used to issue his clients with fines, and he's like, why? Well, we haven't received it. He's like, but I went and handed it into a tax office. How have you not received this return? And then eventually they'd find it, and then the fines would go away. But in the meantime, it's an awful lot of distress to somebody who's being subjected to those fines. So personally, I wouldn't touch the paper return. Once you get onto the electronic side and doing it yourself, again, personally, I'd tend to go with the expert. But again, as I say, we do have a few clients whose situations minimally complicated but not so complicated, who do prefer to do it themselves. But then 9 times out of 10 they'll tend to have a call just to make sure that they're comfortable with, if anything's changed in their situation, they will always have a call to discuss it and make sure they're filling in their returns appropriately.
Sorry about that, just had to close the blind. So yeah, ultimately there are differences when it comes to the international side of things, right? There's key differences, and actually timing and things like that. And when people have done their research first, when they've got an idea about what the situation is, say for example, you know what, I think I am not tax resident because I've run through the statutory residence test and I think this, I'm coming to you to just check that. Where do you stand on that? How do you approach clients who have this kind of almost truth that they've created? Is it fair that they get it right all the time, or actually can you what's your take on that?
So I find it really interesting when people come to me with questions about statutory residence test. I don't know whether it's just me being able to string out a conversation, but I can quite comfortably talk about the statutory residence test for 45 minutes consecutively if I'm going through it properly, which I always like to do, because the way that it works is you as you say, think about a flow chart. You have a couple of tests in terms of being automatically non-resident. The answer, if you answer yes, you end up as automatic non-resident. If you answer no, you just move your way through the test. You then have the little quagmire, which is the automatic UK tax residence section, and then you end up down in the sufficient ties test. So quite often we will have people, basically, if somebody came to me and said, I'm going to spend 0 days in the UK during a particular tax year, then I'm not going to string that out by 45 minutes. That's the first test. That, like, if it's 15 or fewer midnights in the UK per tax year, you are automatically non-resident. if it's in your first 3 years of residence, blah, blah, blah. But quite a lot of people go on to full-time work outside of the UK and they go, well, this is how I'm going to be non-resident. The thing with full-time work outside of the UK is you can't have a significant break from this full-time work outside of the UK. So what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if you decide you don't like your job, and so you leave your job without having a safety net and you don't have another job to go to? What happens if it then takes you 2 months, 3 months to get back into another role? All of a sudden, that full-time work outside of the UK test does not apply, and therefore you then start having to look further on down the list. And similarly, if somebody comes to you, they're retired, so full-time work outside of the UK does not apply to them, and they start talking about the sufficient ties test. That's fine, but we've actually got all of this and this to go through before we can even look at the sufficient ties test. Quite often you do get people who jump straight to a test that they want to look at and ignore the rest that's going on. And as I say, I would never say that you can go the whole way through the statutory residence test. If you need to go the whole way through it, you can't do that in 15 minutes.